Hello, everybody. This is Victoria Longo with today's Friday at 5. And I am excited about this topic. It's something I've thought about for a while, as with most of these topics. Today is all about when it's easier to say yes and the power that actually comes when you say no. I've seen this with people and their pets, with people and their children, with people just in their relationships in general with other people. There's so many times where we just agree to things when we don't want to, because it's the easier thing to do, because. And I think that there's a lot of negativity associated with the word no. We want to avoid that. No can be seen as bad or wrong, and we don't want to be seen as bad or wrong. And we don't want to hurt people's feelings, and we want people to like us. So we say yes, and yes, and yes, and yes. What that actually creates is a lot of problems down the road. I've seen this, again, with people and their dogs. I've been around dogs my entire life, and there are certain people who have humanized dogs and don't teach them commands. They're so cute, and we can't say no. Oh, it's that's just how he is. It's so cute. But when you're in public in a situation and he acts that way, where he's lunging at something, what might have been funny at one point or cute, and you didn't want to say no and you didn't want to hurt his feelings, now becomes a problem. And I do walk dogs. I have walked dogs in the past for other people. And so I've been around dogs that I've seen this exact thing happen where, oh, but he's so cute and I just love him. He's so sweet. And then an asshole on the leash, like total asshole. And I'm spending my entire walk trying to correct bad behavior because the dog was never told no. Now, some people might get offended that I'm segueing into kids, but I've seen this a lot with children too. Don't want to hurt the kids' feelings. We can't have them fail. We can't say no, so we say yes. And again, we get into a public situation, the child acts up, and that might be the time where a parent is like, we can't do this now. But if the child has never heard no before, they're not going to start listening in that moment. And then it's going to cause a scene. It's going to cause a meltdown. And it makes things a lot worse in the long run, because now you have a situation that's been created that takes a lot of work to correct, and a lot of repetition, a lot of enforcement, a lot of effort. When if initially when something had happened, if our response was no, we likely wouldn't be down this road where it would escalate to the point where a dog is an asshole on the leash, a child is melting down in public. Now, children do melt down in public, but if we segue this into adults and into our relationships with people, there are so many times where we say yes because we don't want to hurt somebody, and we want to help them, and we're a kind person and we're a good person, so we do for others, but maybe we don't have the time, maybe we're not interested, and maybe we end up letting them down because we took too much on, we put too much on our plate. When if we would have just said no, they could have found somebody else. They could have, figured something else out, if not somebody else. So there's a lot of ways that we create stories, and this goes back to my video that I talked about last week about people when they do ask for favors. And also, you can always tell the energy speaks way louder than words. So if somebody is really not interested in what's being done and they say yes, like I've had people, I asked somebody to join me on a trip and I offered to pay for everything except for their food and, whatever drinks, whatever entertainment they wanted. But I was basically going to pay for the travel there, for the hotel stay. So it was a free trip for them. And was told yes. I planned everything out. And literally the morning that I was leaving, it was, I can't make it. Now, I knew all along that this person was not interested in joining me. They were doing it because they wanted to do me a favor. They were being nice, and they ended up letting me down in the end because either something better came along, or I don't even remember what the excuse was of why they couldn't go, but they were probably looking for a way out of it, or there was nothing better that was along at that moment, and they understood where I was coming from, so they didn't want to let me down. But in the end, I ended up having to literally last minute rearrange my plans, which was not fun for me. So I've learned that there's a lot of power in saying no from the beginning. There's a lot of power if we're not interested in something in saying no, thank you. No, I'm not doing this. We're owning our space. We're owning us, and nobody can live our life except for us. And so when we're constantly taking on for other people, who the hell are we? What are we here for then? We're just here bending over backwards for everybody else, giving, not getting anything in return, and then resenting it. Is that, that's not really that healthy in my point of view, to sit there and give everything we have and then resent everybody because when we need something, nobody else is there. When we're giving, and we can't catch a break. So we have all these stories when, a lot of times we can say no. Now, I do help people out, but I don't do it all the time. I do it if I have the time, if I have the space, and if I'm interested. And if I'm not, I will say no. I was just invited to free tickets to a concert this past week, front row, VIP admission, the whole nine. Artist wasn't really somebody that I was interested in, and I said no. Would it have been cool? Probably. But also, there were other things that were more important to me that I needed to do, that I wanted to get taken care of. So rather than say, yeah, sure, it's free, why not? I said no. And he was able to find somebody else who would actually enjoy it. Because if I were to have gone when I didn't want to, maybe I would have enjoyed myself, but maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would have been thinking about everything else I could have been doing. So, again, our energy speaks, and people are going to be able to read that and to interpret whatever they want, make up whatever story they want as to why that is. Okay, so if we're saying no from the beginning, we don't have to justify why. We don't have to give reasons. We can, if somebody was like, hey, why not? Like in the case of this, these tickets, it was like, oh, well, like he really tried to push on all the benefits of it. And it was really awesome, but there were other things, again, that were more important to me. And so I just, it's not personal to him. It's personal to me and where I'm spending my time, because I can't be giving all my time away to everybody else, because then if I'm not well, how can I take care of anybody else? And this has always been something that I've thought, because, it's been preached that it's better to give than receive, that, we should help out our neighbor and we should give. And, I've seen it in my family. I've seen it in my friends. And again, nobody's really taking care of that person, not even them, right? They don't have the time. They're too tired. They're not sleeping. They're not eating well because they're constantly stressed. They're running around. And when we start saying no, and we start setting those boundaries to get what really works for us in our lives with the time that we have, we appreciate things more. Like I said, I'm happy to help people. I'm happy to do things within my, personal interest, time, space, all of those things. Because, there's a lot of things that are going on in my life. So time is one of the most valuable things for me, where I don't have a lot of it. So I pick and choose where my free time is going to be spent. And I want to spend it doing things that I enjoy. Now, do I do that all the time? No. There are still things that I get caught up in where I say yes when I don't want to. And again, people can tell, or I'm late, or there's a different energy to it, because I'm not as committed to whatever that is. So, a lot of times it is easier just to say yes. We're giving somebody what they want. We're telling them what they want to hear. If it's a bad behavior, it's easier just to overlook it and just be like, yeah, okay, or laugh it off, or let it go, not mention it at all, not even say yes, just not mention it at all. But in the long run, what is that actually creating? And that's where, I've also started looking for my own life is, what am I actually creating for the long term if I let this go? If I ignore this now, if I don't choose this now, if I don't take a stand right now, what is it going to create long term? Because we might say yes. Let's say we're in a relationship. And not that I've done this, and not that I've seen people do this often, but let's say we're in a relationship and we're not really that into the person, but we're more afraid of being alone. It's the best that we can get. We might not find anybody else, right? So all of these things that all of these stories that we tell ourselves as to why it's better to stay with this person than leave. And this person really has feelings for us, and then they propose. Well, now we don't want to say no, right? So we're going to say yes, so we don't hurt their feelings, and then our family's going to get excited, and then we start planning the wedding, and then we get caught up into this whirlwind and have all these reasons of why we can't say no now. Well, we're too invested. We've spent too much money. We've done this. But what is the cost? Like the actual cost of saying yes when you don't want to, of saying yes to being with this person in that kind of commitment? It's your fucking life. That's the cost. You are now living your life with somebody that you don't really love, because it was easier to say yes, because it was easier to go along with it. And, if we're not actually standing for us, it is, like I said, costing us our life. Most of us, though, probably don't acknowledge that. And so if you're aware that you've gone along with something that you didn't want to, if you're aware that you're not really into this person, but you really don't want to be alone. The fear of being alone is greater than the fear of what life is going to be like with this person. Then accept your fate, right? Don't blame them for not having what you want. Don't blame them for not giving you what you need, because you're choosing it. You're knowing that you're not getting it, and you're actively saying yes when you could say no, because you're more afraid to say no. Most of us, what we do is we end up blaming the other person, resenting them, criticizing them, cutting them down, making them wrong. All of these things that we create, all because it was easier for us to say yes than it was to walk away, than it was to say no, than it was to actually find somebody that can give us what we want and to give us what we need. And so, yes, it's easier to say yes a lot of times. It takes a lot of emotional courage to say no, to stand what's true for us. It takes emotional courage to know that being alone isn't the worst thing in the world, right? Trusting in something that you haven't even seen yet. Trusting that there's somebody out there because you haven't even met them yet. It's a lot easier to trust in what we see, to put our faith in what's actually in front of our eyes. But the magic happens in the unknown. The magic happens when we actually say no, when we actually take a stand and trust without seeing, and trust without knowing all the pieces, right? Because that's when the universe can come in, or God, or whatever you want to call it. That's when the universe can come in and fill in the pieces with that person that's going to give you what you want, and be able to meet your needs in a way that this current relationship isn't. But if you're saying, well, I'm going to go with this because I see it, I know it, and it's the best I'm going to get, well, then you've already decided this is your fate. And again, the cost is your life. And really, because by that time that we do, just go along with it, we do just say yes for all of these reasons, the excuses and the reasons why we can't leave continue to grow. Because then maybe you have kids, maybe you buy a house, maybe you have a lot of significant investments together now that it's a lot of work to separate. So it continues to be easier to say yes, and continues to be easier to stay in a relationship where there is no love, where there is no joy, and where there is no satisfaction. Personally, that is not a life that I want to live, so I don't. I tried it for a really long time, and I said yes for a really long time to a person that I knew was not a match for me. I knew that he wasn't what I wanted. And there was a big part of me that hoped and wished and prayed that if I stayed with him long enough, he could suddenly turn into what I needed and to what I wanted. But during those 8.5 years together, I resented him. I was a bitch because I was so miserable. I was unhappy in life in general with other things, tended to take that out on him. Wondered what was wrong with him, why he couldn't do whatever to be what I wanted. And it really wasn't about him. It was just, I knew that he was not the right person, and I continued to stay, wishing, hoping, and praying instead of having the courage to say, no, this no longer works for me. Because our reality, our society, doesn't agree with walking away from a relationship that is perfectly fine, from the outside, right? You don't just walk away because it doesn't feel right. You don't just say no and leave somebody. There has to be drama, and there has to be an affair, or there has to be abuse, and there has to be lying and cheating and stealing and, horrible things so that we can finally walk away. And some people do create that. Some people I've met do want to leave their partner and, want a psychic reading. It's happened multiple times in the past where they're wanting me to tap into what I get a sense of with their partner if they're cheating. And every time what I got is that the person wasn't. I think maybe one time they actually were, but bigger than that were the people that were contacting me for the psychic reading no longer wanted to be in the relationship, and they were looking for that excuse to give them a reason to leave. They were looking for that excuse to walk away because they didn't have the power, the courage to say no. They didn't recognize the power that they had by standing up and doing that. Because again, it was easier to stay. It's easier to say yes, and it's easier to find one of those reasons, excuses, and justifications that society deems okay to walk away. People get made fun of if you walk away from a perfectly good relationship, right? Perfectly good from the outside, not from the inside. Because like I said, from the inside, my relationship, and I don't know, maybe it didn't look so good on the outside. I thought it resembled pretty much every relationship that I had ever seen, with the exception of a few. We were pretty good friends and, buddy. At home, there were a lot of fights. At home, there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, but I thought, when we were in public, we didn't act any different from most people. Most people I see in public don't touch each other. They don't sit together. They might be on opposite sides of the room. They're not hugging, especially if you've been with somebody for an extended period of time, right? It's not usual to be in a relationship for 8 years and still want somebody close to you and want their arms around you and want them to kiss you. And, and that's really sad to me. And I think a lot of it boils down to that it's easier just to go along with what you have, even if it's not working, than it is to have the courage to say no, to find something, again, that you probably don't know that exists, that you haven't seen evidence of, and make that work. So, Sorry about that. So I am going to cut it there. Now that I have a noisy dog. And so it's, again, a lot of times it is easier to continue going along and saying yes, but look at what is the cost. What is it actually costing you? And a lot of times the cost is our own lives. The cost is, I don't want to say our freedom, but in a way it is our freedom. The cost is that we lose ourselves. We lose ourselves saying yes to other people. And that is where we can get really miserable because we're so shut down. We're not allowed to be us. And that's not a life I want to live. And that's not a life I really want to see anybody live. I want more happy people. I want more people, experiencing joy, experiencing, love in its greatest forms. Because I am here to tell you that after 9 years with somebody, I still want his arms around me. I still am so happy to see him. I still enjoy him, in so many ways. And I didn't know that that was possible before. I stayed for so long hoping that I could get this that I have now, not realizing that the greatest gift I could give myself was to say no and walk away. And again, I had all the excuses. I owned a house. We didn't have kids. We had dogs together, so that would be breaking up their home. So many reasons why it was easier to stay and easier to keep going. But the cost was I didn't want to live anymore. I wasn't going to kill myself. I wasn't plotting suicide, but I really could not go on in life anymore that way at all. So that was too great a price for me to pay. And there was so much more freedom in letting go, in saying no, and trusting that what I knew was possible could actually be created. So if you're interested in playing and finding something like that, I do have a new program, Relationships Reimagined, where I help people get to this space. I wonder what the world would be like if we actually had people who are happy, happy with life. So, if you'd like to come play, you can contact me and visit my website, victorialongo.net. And I look forward to chatting with you next week. Next week is it's a good one. Not feeling the love. So that's what I'm going to be discussing next week at Friday at 5. I'm still learning how this works. I actually have something scheduled tonight. So I was trying to schedule this post to go out at 5. I think it started earlier. So my apologies. Still working on YouTube, but I thank you for joining.